The town of Ravenwood, Ohio, was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen, with its wide, empty streets, mammand, pop diners, and the old courthouse that stood as the town's pride. Life here moved at a slow and predictable pace. But on the night of September 12th, the silence of Ravenwood was broken forever. At 9:15 p.m., Claire Donovan, the 22-year-old daughter of prominent defense attorney Richard Donovan, was last seen leaving a local coffee shop. She was supposed to meet her father at home for dinner. She never made it. When midnight came and went with no sign of Claire, her father called the police. By morning, Ravenwood was buzzing with fear and whispers. How could the daughter of one of the most powerful men in town simply vanish? Detective Evelyn Hart, a seasoned investigator with sharp instincts and a reputation for digging where others refused, was assigned the case. She had seen countless missing persons reports, but something about Claire's disappearance felt different, too neat, too deliberate. At first glance, the only clue was Claire's abandoned car, parked 2 blocks from the coffee shop. The keys were still inside, the driver's door slightly ajar. No signs of struggle, no blood, no fingerprints out of place. It was as if she had simply stepped out of the car and evaporated into thin air. But Evelyn knew better. People don't just vanish. Someone had taken her. Standing by the car in the early morning fog, Evelyn lit a cigarette, her eyes scanning the empty street. She could feel it in her gut. This was no ordinary abduction. Claire Donovan's disappearance was the opening move in a much bigger game, and whoever was playing it was dangerous. Detective Evelyn Hart sat at her cluttered desk in Ravenwood Police Department, staring at the preliminary report. Missing person cases always started the same way: family statements, last known whereabouts, and speculation. But Claire Donovan wasn't just anybody. She was the daughter of Richard Donovan, a man whose name carried weight in both the courtroom and the dark corners of politics. By noon, reporters were already circling outside the police station, hungry for answers. The chief wanted Evelyn to treat it carefully, too carefully, but Evelyn didn't do careful. She did the truth. She started by retracing Claire's last movements. The barista at the cafe confirmed Claire had been there around 8:45 p.m. She had ordered her usual black coffee with a splash of vanilla. She seemed distracted, checking her phone repeatedly. She left a few minutes later alone. The car was found 2 blocks away, but something didn't add up. Evelyn crouched by the driver's seat again that afternoon, letting her eyes wander across the details others might miss. That's when she noticed it. Just under the seat, wedged deep into the corner, a small silver flash drive. It hadn't been logged into evidence. Someone had overlooked it, or maybe they hadn't wanted it found. Evelyn slipped on gloves and carefully pulled it out. No labels, just a simple drive. Back at her office, she inserted it into a secure laptop. The screen lit up with a folder titled Project Blackthorn. Her pulse quickened. Inside were scanned documents, legal briefs, and what looked like confidential financial statements. Most of the files were heavily encrypted, but one PDF opened without a password. It was a deposition transcript. A witness describing a secret meeting between Richard Donovan and a high-profile state senator involving bribes and something darker, covering up a criminal case that never made it to trial. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her cigarette burning low. Claire hadn't just disappeared. She had stumbled onto something powerful people would kill to protect. The next morning, Evelyn went to question Richard Donovan himself. He was pacing his lavish office, his tie loosened, his face pale with fear. "Detective Hart," he said, his voice shaky, "you have to find her, whoever took Claire. They know it's the only way to get to me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "And why would anyone want to get to you, Mr. Donovan?" He hesitated, then glanced toward the window as if someone might be listening. "Because I've made enemies, dangerous enemies." She leaned forward. "Then let's not waste time. Tell me who they are." But Richard just shook his head. "They're not the kind of people you go looking for, detective. If Claire has crossed their path, she's in more danger than you can imagine." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. Claire Donovan wasn't just missing, she was a pawn in a war of secrets, and Evelyn had just found the first piece of the puzzle. Detective Evelyn Hart didn't trust Richard Donovan. He was too polished, too careful, and every word seemed rehearsed. Men like him didn't climb to power without stepping on necks, and they sure as hell didn't keep their hands clean. Still, his panic over Claire's disappearance looked real. Or maybe he was just a good actor. Evelyn left Donovan's office with more questions than answers. On her way out, she noticed something odd. One of his assistants, a young man in his 20s, avoided her eyes as he passed. His hands shook as he gathered papers from a desk. Evelyn filed his nervous behavior in the back of her mind. That evening, she decided to pay a visit to Claire's apartment, the small one. Bedroom on the east side of town didn't match her father's wealth. Claire was independent, working part-time while attending law school. Her neighbors described her as friendly but private, often buried in her books or jogging late at night. Inside, the place was neat, almost too neat. Evelyn moved carefully, scanning bookshelves, drawers, and closets. Then, in Claire's desk drawer, she found a leather-bound notebook. Flipping through its pages, Evelyn's pulse quickened. Claire had been keeping note, cryptic references to Blackthorn. Names of political figures, and a chilling line repeated 3 times. "They're watching me." Suddenly, Evelyn heard a floorboard creak in the hallway. She froze, hand reaching for a service weapon. Slowly, she stepped to the door and swung it open. Empty, but when she returned to the living room, the notebook was gone. Her stomach dropped. Someone had been inside the apartment with her, watching, waiting. Evelyn stormed out into the hall, but the place was silent. Whoever it was had slipped away. She cursed under her breath. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. Evelyn herself was being pulled into the web. Back at the precinct, she ran the flash drive files through the FBI encrypted database. Within minutes, her screen flashed a warning, access restricted, classified. Before she could process it, her phone buzzed, a blocked number. She answered. A distorted voice whispered, "Detective Hart, stop digging. Claire Donovan is gone. If you keep looking, you'll be next." The line went dead. For a long moment, Evelyn sat frozen, the weight of the warning pressing on her chest. But fear wasn't her nature. It only sharpened her resolve. Whoever these people were, they underestimated her, and that was their first mistake. She didn't know yet if Richard Donovan was a victim or a villain. She didn't know who had Claire or why. But she did know one thing. This case had just become more than an investigation. It was a war. And she was ready to fight. The autumn wind swept through Ravenwood's deserted streets as Detective Evelyn Hart parked her car outside a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town. She wasn't here for a drink. She was here because of a name she'd found scribbled in Claire's notebook, Mason Briggs. Mason wasn't just anybody. He was an ex-con, a fixer known for doing dirty jobs for powerful people. If Claire had written his name, it meant she'd been digging into something far darker than schoolwork or internships. Inside, the bar smelled of cigarette smoke and stale beer. A jukebox played a slow country tune no one was listening to. Evelyn spotted Mason, hunched over a glass of bourbon. He looked older than his 40 years, with scars on his knuckles and the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too much. She slid onto the stool beside him. Mason Briggs. He stiffened, then smirked. "Depends who's asking." "Detective Evelyn Hart, Ravenwood PD." He chuckled darkly. "Then I don't know you." Evelyn leaned closer. "Claire Donovan. She wrote your name. Why?" Mason's smirk faded. He tapped his glass, debating whether to answer. Finally, he muttered, "Because she was smart. Too smart. She came asking questions about Project Blackthorn. I told her to stay away." "Blackthorn," Evelyn repeated. What is it? Mason's jaw tightened. A cover-up. A deal between politicians, cops, and businessmen. Money laundered through shell companies. Cases buried. Witnesses silenced. Your precious Richard Donovan. He's right in the middle of it. Evelyn felt the weight of his words. If this was true, Claire hadn't just vanished. She had been silenced for what she knew. Before she could press further, Mason's eyes darted to the door. Evelyn followed his gaze. 2 men in dark coats had entered, their movements too deliberate, their stares locked on Mason. "Get out," Mason whispered, now, but it was too late. The men approached, hands slipping into their jackets. Evelyn reacted fast, drawing her weapon. The bar erupted in chaos, shouts, overturned tables, the crack of gunfire. Mason dove behind the counter. Evelyn fired back, shattering a neon sign. One of the men went down, clutching his leg, but the other fled through the back door. Evelyn chased him into the alley, her boots pounding the pavement. The man sprinted toward a black SUV. Evelyn fired a warning shot. He slipped, stumbled, then scrambled inside the vehicle. The SUV roared to life and sped into the night, tires screeching. Breathing hard, Evelyn returned to the bar. Mason was gone. So was any chance of getting more answers, for now, but one thing was certain, she wasn't the only one hunting. Back at the precinct, Evelyn pulled the traffic cam feeds. She traced the SUV path until it disappeared near the abandoned Steelridge warehouse, a derelict building on the edge of town, a perfect place to hide someone, or something. By midnight, Evelyn stood outside the rusting gates of Steelridge, her weapon drawn. The air was heavy, silent, and thick with the smell of old iron. Inside, shadows stretched across broken machinery. Then she heard it. A muffled cry, a woman's voice, help. Her heart raced. Claire, Evelyn crept forward, flashlight sweeping the dark corners. Suddenly, a figure lunged from behind. A masked man, knife in hand. Evelyn twisted, barely dodging the blade, and slammed him into a pillar. They struggled, fists flying, until she finally pinned him down, ripping the mask off. It wasn't a stranger, it was Richard Donovan's assistant, the same young man she had seen trembling in the office. Evelyn's blood ran cold. "Where's Claire?" she demanded, pressing her gun against his temple. The man's lips curled into a sinister smile. "You're too late, detective. You're in their trap now." And before she could react, the echo of footsteps filled the warehouse, dozens of them. She wasn't the hunter anymore. She was the hunted. Detective Evelyn Hart stood frozen in the cavernous dark of the Steelridge warehouse. The assistant she had pinned to the floor was laughing, a hollow, unnerving sound that bounced off the rusted beams and broken windows. And then came the footsteps. Figures emerged from the shadows one by one, dressed in dark coats, faces hidden in the dim light. At least 7 men surrounded her, forming a circle. In the center, stepping forward like a king claiming his throne, was Richard Donovan himself. Evelyn's heart sank. "You," she whispered. Donovan adjusted his cufflinks, his calm demeanor at odds with the chaos around them. "Detective Hart, I warned you. This was bigger than you could handle. You reported your own daughter missing." Evelyn shot back, her weapon still steady. "You played the grieving father. Why?" He sighed, almost pitying. "Because Claire betrayed me. She stole those files. She thought she could expose Blackthorn, ruin everything I built, my empire, my alliances, my power. Do you think I could allow that, even if she's my daughter?" Evelyn's blood boiled. "You had her kidnapped. She isn't kidnapped." Donovan interrupted smoothly. His eyes gleamed in the dim light. "She's here by choice." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Evelyn's breath caught. Claire Donovan. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, but she wasn't bound or gagged. She stood tall, her eyes cold and unreadable. "Claire," Evelyn whispered, "we've been searching for you. Everyone thought you were in danger." Claire's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "Danger? No, detective. I'm the one who uncovered everything. I knew my father's secrets. I knew about Blackthorn. I wanted to stop him." "Then why are you here? Why with him?" Evelyn demanded. Claire's eyes flicked to Donovan, then back to Evelyn. "Because the deeper I dug, the more I realized. I'm not any different. Power runs in my blood, and you don't destroy an empire from the outside. You take it from within. Evelyn's chest tightened as the truth crashed down on her. Claire hadn't been the victim, she had been the heir. Donovan placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, pride gleaming in his eyes. She's stronger than I ever imagined, ruthless, clever. She'll lead Blackthorn into the future. No, Evelyn growled, raising her weapon. Not if I end this tonight. The men around her closed in, but Evelyn moved fast. She fired a shot, hitting the assistant in the leg. Chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, the metallic clang of bullets ricocheting off steel. Evelyn dove behind a pillar, returning fire, her mind racing. She had come for Claire, but now she understood. Claire didn't want saving. She wanted the throne. In the crossfire, Evelyn spotted an old control panel on the wall. With a desperate sprint, she reached it and slammed the lever down. The warehouse roared to lie. Faint machinery grinding, sparks flying, alarms blaring. The sudden noise and flashing lights threw the gunmen into disarray. Evelyn used the distraction, firing precise shots, dropping 2 men. Another lunged at her, but she swung her gun like a club, knocking him unconscious. Finally, she turned her weapon back to Donovan and Claire, who stood side by side in the chaos. "You can kill me, detective," Donovan shouted over the alarms, "but you'll never stop Blackthorn. It's bigger than me. Bigger than her. It's everywhere." Evelyn hesitated, her finger tightening on the trigger. She had taken down killers before, corrupt cops, drug lords, but this was different. This was a hydra. Cut off one head and 2 more would rise. Claire stared at her, unflinching. "You don't get it, detective. You think you're the hunter, but you've already lost. Blackthorn owns the courts, the banks, the police. Even if you kill us here, the system will bury you." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt the weight of defeat pressing on her. She couldn't kill them both and walk away. She couldn't win this war alone, but she could make sure the truth survived. From her pocket, she pulled the flash drive, the one Claire had tried to hide. Evelyn had copied its contents onto a secure FBI server before coming here. It was already in motion. She smiled grimly. "You're wrong. I don't need to kill you. The world already knows." Donovan's confident smile faltered for the first time. Claire's eyes widened in fury. And in that moment of hesitation, Evelyn pulled a smoke grenade from her belt, yanked the pin, and hurled it at their feet. Thick smoke filled the warehouse as shouts and gunfire erupted. Evelyn slipped into the shadows, her footsteps echoing into the night. When the smoke cleared, Richard and Claire stood coughing, furious. The detective was gone, but the files were already on their way to the press. Epilogue: 2 weeks later, Ravenwood was no longer the quiet town it once had been. Federal agents swarmed the courthouse, politicians resigned, and headlines screamed about Project Blackthorn, a conspiracy that had reached the very heart of the state. Richard Donovan was arrested on multiple charges. But Claire had vanished. No one knew if she escaped or if she was hiding, waiting to rebuild. Detective Evelyn Hart sat in her office, staring out at the rain-soaked streets. She had won a battle, but the war wasn't over. She knew Claire was still out there, and one day their paths would cross again. Evelyn lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the night. "Game on," she whispered. "Thanks for watching."